Hey there, drone fans. Rick here again from Drone Valley. In today's clip, I'd like to share a few winter flying tips because we are smack dab in the middle of winter here in New Jersey, and I was out flying this morning, and I thought to myself, there are probably a lot of pilots out there that maybe haven't put their quads up yet in colder weather, and things can get a little bit funky when it gets cold out there. So let me sit down, put together a clip where I share some of the things I've learned over the years, sometimes the hard way, and sometimes from other pilots, that'll keep your quad safe, because I want you to get out there and enjoy that beautiful landscape with the snow-covered field and capture all that amazing footage, but I also want you to come home with your quad. So these tips will make it a little bit more fun when you're flying, and they'll also keep your quad a lot safer. All right, so the first big tip, and this is super important to keep in mind, if you're out in the woods and you see some yellow snow, don't eat the yellow snow. I can't stress that enough, because even though it looks like somebody might have spilled a Slurpee over there, it's not a Slurpee. Don't get anywhere near it. Nothing good's gonna come from that. So anyway, now that I've gotten that out of the way, I also realize I live in New Jersey, and this channel is viewed by people all over the world. So when I'm talking about cold weather, I'm talking about New Jersey weather. And to be fair, we don't get winters. If we get a foot of snow, it's pandemonium in the state. People can't go down the road, everybody gets cranky. So it's not really winter, it's like winter light. If you live in Colorado and you live, I don't know, somewhere else, Siberia, Alaska, if you live in the outskirts of Russia, that's a winter. That's cold weather. It's not New Jersey weather. But for me, when I'm talking about cold weather flying, I'm talking about weather where you can walk outside and still be comfortable. And the rule of thumb I use is if I can go outside and my eyelids don't freeze shut, it's probably warm enough to fly my quad. Now, if you live in Colorado and it's sub-zero temperatures, I don't know if I'd put a quad up. I'd be really, really scared to put it up in that kind of weather, because I'm worried that the electronics and the chemistry of the batteries don't react well with colder weather. They start doing funky things, and the colder it gets, the funkier it gets. So I'd be a little bit worried. But if you're flying someplace where you can be outside with a jacket on and you're uncomfortable, but it's not freezing cold, fly your quad. You're gonna have a lot of fun with it. All right, so let's get into the tips. The first tip I've got, for all seriousness, and this is the first one, and it's a big one, is be conservative. And what I mean by that is, your quad's going to behave differently in the cold than it does in the summer. So even though you may have flown it 100 times over the summer, when you take it out in the cold, it's going to behave differently. So my recommendation is, when you go out for the first time to fly your quad, not just any quad, but the quad you're going to fly, spend some time with it in close and low. So take it out in the backyard in that cold temperature, put it up in the air, and fly it around a little bit. Take it out 10 feet, take it up 10 feet, spin it around, and get a feel for how quickly it reacts to the joysticks, because that relationship you develop with your quad over the summer is going to be different. It's going to be like a different kid in your house that you have to get used to. So spend some time so you know exactly how fast it moves, how fast you can elevate, how fast you can descend, because if you get it out there 1,500 feet and you start getting low battery warnings, it's going to be a different return path speed-wise than it would be in the summertime. So be conservative, and that's probably the biggest, most important thing, is that you get a feel for what your quad can do in cold weather. All right, the next thing I'll say is bring a landing mat. And I don't care if you have an official landing mat, a piece of cardboard, or a floor mat from your car, but bring something with you, because I want you to think of flying in the winter as almost like the minute you leave your house, you're now standing in a foot of water, because that's essentially what you're doing when you're out there in the snow. It's just frozen water. But what I mean by that is, you can't set anything down. So whether you hand catch, hand launch, or land on a mat, having a place that you can lay on top of the snow that'll be relatively dry, that'll at least be organized, where you can put your quad down, put your bag down, maybe drop your controller for a second when you're changing batteries. That gives you a safe place, sort of a home base, if you will, to put stuff down. Now, I like to land and take off. I feel like, for me, maybe I'm old school, that's like piloting 101, to be able to take off from a mat. And when I come back, I love landing on the mat and try and landing on the H. But even if you hand launch and hand catch, having a mat down means you've got a safe place to put all your gear down. And heaven forbid you put it up and winter weather can change, and this thing comes back and you've got your gloves on, and all of a sudden it's jockeying around up there because the wind's buffeting it. It's essentially a Cuisinart flying in the sky. I'm not reaching up for that thing. I want to land it somewhere. So having that landing mat means I've got a safe place to put my gear and land my quad if I have to land it. All right, so that's the landing mat. The next has to do with temperature. Temperature is super important for a lot of different reasons, because electronics does not like really cold temperatures. So funky things can start happening with all the digital brilliance that are built into these quads. Things like GPS coordination, gyros, compass calibration, motors spinning at different speeds. All kinds of weird things can happen. So you have to be really cognizant of that fact, because when you put it out, the minute you start seeing any kind of funky behavior, you start getting GPS warnings, you start getting compass errors, bring it home, put it down, pack it away for the day. Don't continue to fly, even if it is that perfect shot where you've got that field lined up and there's pure as the driven snow, there's no footprints, but there's a deer out there and you're like, I gotta get the shot of the deer. You're gonna lose the quad. So be conservative. Again, rule number one. Beyond that, the temperature can also affect other things, because you're flying the quad, so the quad is up in the air, it's passing through that cold air. It's got vents on the front. The air is passing across the electronics. It's also passing across the battery. So the challenge is the chemistry of the battery has issues with cold air. So the two different quads here, I've got the Mini 2 right here where the battery's internal, and I've got the Mavic Air where the battery is essentially external. You have to remember that cold air passing across a warm battery is going to draw that heat away from it. That's going to cause issues with that chemistry reaction inside. So you're going to find that in the wintertime, your batteries are not going to last as long. And worse than that, you're not going to get as long a flight time out of it. But worse than that, they start acting funky. Now, my experience has been when I get them down below 50%, I really have to keep an eye on that battery because it could go 70, 60, 50, 25. And then it's a panic moment because alarms are going off and I got to get it home and I know it's not going to fly back as quick. So keep an eye on the batteries. And my recommendation is bring extra batteries with you, but don't fly them below 40% or 30%. Like at that point, try to get them back towards you so you can land if you have to really quickly. Another thing I'll tell you about the batteries is that I don't leave them in the case. When I go out and fly in the wintertime, I'll bring a jacket that has a lot of inside pockets on it and I'll slide the batteries inside those pockets close to my body because my body warmth will keep those batteries warm right up to the moment that I pop them in the quad and fly off, and I find I get a lot better use out of them. If I leave them in the case and they get cold in the field, they've already started to sort of, I don't know, go numb on me, if you will, where they're not going to fly quite as far. So keep them in your jacket. Now, another good suggestion would be, I've got a friend who does this, using a fishing vest or one of those sort of emergency vests that people use when they're directing traffic. They tend to be very thin. They have a lot of pockets on them. You can slide a lot of batteries in them, put them inside your jacket, and your body warmth will keep them warm. You could also use a pocket warmer. Now, I'm not saying put it up against the battery, but if you have it in a pocket and you've got the other batteries on the inside, it'll keep everything sort of warmer and you'll be in good shape. Another thing to think about with the colder weather is you're going to get cold. So make sure that you dress warmly. It sounds like basic 101, but you're standing in a field, the wind is whipping, you're out there for a long time, and your attention is on the quad. You're not thinking about yourself, so your ears are going to get cold, your fingers are going to get cold. Wear some decent gloves, and if you buy gloves, try and get a set of those gloves that have those touch fingers on them, because if you're using standard gloves we use to shovel your snow, and you're trying to touch your screen, you can't really do anything. So having a set of gloves that has the touch fingers on it means you're warm and you can still make changes to the controller inside. The last thing I'll say is the electronics of the controller are important, but your phone's important as well. Some phones are better than others in the cold weather. For some reason, I found that some of my Android phones don't do as well as my iPhones. They tend to run a little bit warmer. I don't know why. Maybe it's the processor inside, but I find that the iPhones do well. The bigger tablets do not do as well in the cold weather for me, and I think that's because it's a huge surface area with the cold air hitting it. It cools it down quicker, and I have issues with it with the larger tablets. So I'd recommend going with a smaller iPhone, or if you're going to go with a tablet, something like the iPad Mini 5 would probably work okay for you. All right, so that's that. Next thing I want to talk about is the air you're flying through, which is super important. And I mentioned before that in the wintertime, and it's basic junior high school chemistry here, or physics maybe, where when you think about air, warmer air tends to be a lot busier. So the air molecules are bouncing around, they're further apart, they're very active, they're moving. Colder air, it tends to slow down. The air molecules are slower, they're closer together, the air is more dense. Now, if you're flying a regular airplane, that's a good thing because the denser the air, the easier it is for the propellers to cut through it and you get better lift out of it. It's also great if you've got an internal combustion engine because the air has more oxygen in it. They're going to pack closer together so you get better efficiency out of the engine. So pilots will tell you they love flying in colder weather because it's more efficient for the plane. It's not necessarily true with the quads because you have no internal combustion engine. You have a battery running a motor that spins this thing through, and you have to think that you're flying through air that's thicker and it's more dense, it's more viscous, its viscosity is higher. So it's not water, it's not molasses, but it's somewhere in between those two. So it's a lot more work for the quad to fight its way through those tighter packed air molecules, which means you're not going to get the efficiency out of it and it's going to cause you issues. So be aware of the fact that you're flying through denser air and that could be an issue. The other thing I'll mention is if you're flying in the wintertime, there's moisture in the air. Even on a perfectly crisp, clear day in the winter, there could be water molecules that are frozen in that air that you're flying through. And now think about that. You're flying through the air that's got sort of mist or it's got ice crystals in it. This is warm. They're going to hit that case. They're immediately going to melt and they're going to be inside with the electronics. So be very, very cautious when you're flying that if there's snow, I know it's beautiful and I've done it where the snow is falling, you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is the perfect shot. I got to get the quad up and fly through the snow. You're really taking a risk because that water getting inside the electronics, number one, could cause the quad to function, immediately fail in the air and come out of the sky like a brick. But more importantly, the water's inside the quad at that point. What do you do when you get back? A couple of tricks you can use there. When you unpack things, when you buy something at the store a lot of times, you'll find that you rip open the box and inside there's a little, looks like a sugar packet of something called desiccant. Now everybody knows what desiccant is. It's something that is used to take moisture out of a particular product, but a lot of people don't know what it is. I know people think that it's a liquid or it's a paste. It's really not. If you look at it under a microscope, it's tiny little crystals that have hundreds and hundreds of holes in them, and what it does essentially is, because of all that surface area, it can absorb a lot of water. So it's a wonderful thing. Don't eat it, because it's not like it's poison, you're going to die, but the problem is if you swallow it, it's going to dehydrate you and kill you. So it will kill you. But anyway, if you're careful with it, I keep those. So anytime we open something up and there's a bag of desiccant, I take it, I put it in a Ziploc bag. I've got a giant Ziploc bag of them. So if I do fly in the wintertime, especially if there's a little bit of snow or mist out there, I'll come home, open up a gigantic gallon freezer bag, put my drone inside of it, throw those desiccants inside of it, and let it sit in there for a little while. That'll pull all the moisture out of the quad. It'll make sure that you won't have any issues. Make sure you take the battery out of it before you stick it in the bag. But do that, and that'll dry out your quad for you. All right, the last thing I wanted to say was the weather. This is the one that'll bite you the quickest, because the weather can be dramatically different in the winter than it's in the summer. And I know you can have storms and squalls and all those things that come through, and I've talked about those before in clips, but in the wintertime, the density of the air can change dramatically the higher you get. So you could fight your way through dense air and then hit an area that's really, really light air above it. So, and that tends to be whipping around up there. So be very, very careful. Watch your attitude indicator. DJI just released this new attitude indicator with the brand new DJI Fly app. In there, you'll see two little wings on either side of your quad when you're flying. Keep your eye on those wings, because if you're flying and you see that attitude change where you can see the horizon shifting like this, even though the camera is going to keep that image perfectly still, the quad is fighting like crazy up there to sort of stay in the air. If you see a lot of that stuff going on, drop it down a little bit, get it to an area where you're not seeing that much buffeting going on, and you'll be in better shape. So being a pilot means you got to be aware of all these things when you're flying, and it's not just to keep other people safe, but it's to protect your gigantic investment in these quads. And wintertime poses a lot of challenges. Now, having said everything I've just said, I don't want to get you scared about flying in the wintertime. I fly in the wintertime. I love it. We just had a big snowfall a couple of days ago. I'm out flying like crazy. I've got all my batteries charged up. I'm ready to go tomorrow morning again. So get out there and fly in the wintertime, but just be conservative. Take your time, learn what you're doing out there, learn how your quad behaves in that colder weather. Make sure when you come back, if you've flown in any kind of weather that's got misting or it's got fog or even snowflakes going, take it, throw it in a bag, throw some desiccant in there, and you're going to be in pretty good shape. And that's pretty much all I had for today. So hopefully some of these tips are things that you can use when you're out there in the field. I love flying these quads, and I love talking to other pilots about flying them. I know you guys are enjoying the hobby as well. So if anything I've said today helps you, I feel like I've done my job. So I'm pretty happy about that. And that's pretty much it. So if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. Until then, I've got new clips coming this week. We've got a ton of stuff we're going to be reviewing. So if you haven't joined the Drone Valley family, hit that subscribe button down there. Again, we've got a lot of cool content coming you're not going to want to miss. So thanks again for watching. And until next time, happy flying.